I mean, first of all, Robert, I mean, Margaret Thatcher was committed to breaking up the union. She wanted to break the power and the backbone of the unions. Did you support that action?
Well, I think that you have to make the distinction. Margaret Thatcher was there to stop union extremism, but actually, if you look at what she did, there were 270 branches of the Conservative trade unionists around the country while she was leader. It was when she, in the 1950s, when she became PPC for Dartford, she was one of the first, Conservative trade unionists was one of the first organisations she ever joined.
But ideologically, it was more than just dealing with extremism. Of course, Arthur Scargill and the Miners' Union, it's obviously well documented. It went broader than that, didn't it? The unions, the print unions in Wapping, it was about reducing power generally of trades unions.
Margaret Thatcher always said we should use legislation to assist trade unionism, but what she also said is that you had to deal with union extremism, and that's what the legislation was about during the 1980s.
Are you saying she was misunderstood in terms of her views and relation with the unions?
You have to look at everything she did, not just part of it.
I mean, why did she pick, then, a fight with the miners? Was it just about extremism, as if you've characterised it?
Well, I think everybody, most moderate people, would accept that Arthur Scargill was fairly hard line and had to be dealt with, that the unions had a significant amount of power at that time. But what I'm arguing in this paper that I've written is to say that we need a new relationship with the trade unions and distinguish between union militants and unions members on the ground.
Let's just go back, Karen, a little bit historically. What do you say to Robert's characterisation of Margaret Thatcher, making that distinction in terms of her dealings with the miners and particularly Arthur Scargill?
Well, I was a nurse at that time, and it was very, very difficult, and the draconian legislation that came in on the back of Margaret Thatcher and John Major was hostile, actually hostile trade legislation towards the trade unions. So I don't share the same vision of Margaret Thatcher's relationship with the trade unions.
And has it irreparably damaged relations with unions, that memory of it, even though it was a long time ago, and one could arguably say that it was needed to be done in terms of dealing with militants?
Has it irreparably damaged relationships with the government, with the Tory party?
With the Tories and the unions.
Well, I think that there is a lack of trust between the two, and I suggest that that's probably what you're trying to repair now with the direction of travel of the writings that you've done. But, you know, the Tories are back in government, and as a trade union, we need to be talking to the Tories about what we can do for our members and how we can progress some of the social inequalities that still exist.
So you do want to build bridges. I mean, in a sense, you've got a similar agenda then. Robert, you would like to build those bridges because, as you say, you have to. They're in government.
Well, yes, we have to work with this administration. We have to work with whoever is in government. And, of course, you know, even when the Labour Party, the Labour government was, you know, the Labour Party was in government, well, you know, we had our differences with them. But, of course, we believe that the Labour Party holds the same values and principles that we do, whereas the Tory party, I think, have very, very different values and principles from the trade union movement.
And how do you combat that image? Because you could argue that communities that suffered so much after the 1980s, they're not going to forgive and forget, and that issue of trust is still very important.
Well, actually, 39% of your union members voted Conservative, according to polls. So it shows that a lot of trade union members, a third of trade union members, vote Conservative. My argument is actually that unions are not only community-minded, a lot of them get involved in community work and are part of the big society, but are very much capitalist institutions and in many ways Conservative because they get a lot of Conservative support.
But isn't one of the problems, Jackie Ashley, that actually the rhetoric that we hear from the Conservative leadership is still quite often one that is union bashing to even if they are trying to distinguish between militants and the unions, that rhetoric is still there?
I think there is still a feeling on both sides that they're opposite sides of the political divide. It's sort of them and us, and I think that is probably a problem for both sides. I mean, I'm not expecting us to see the return to beer and sandwiches at number 10 soon, but I do think there needs to be talks. But I think really you're underestimating what Margaret Thatcher did. I think she fundamentally changed the unions. They are much less powerful. Union membership has gone down a lot. Really destroyed the very powerful unions. And I think so now there is a different relationship to be built, but I think it's going to need quite a change of tone.
And to some extent, do you not always have to choose sides? when it comes to it, you know, there have been strikes over pensions. If there is more action taken by unions, you will have to decide, do you support the government line or do you support the unions?
Of course, but what I'm saying is that we have to, and I accept this in our language particularly, make a big distinction between union militants and vast majority of millions of moderate trade union members, as many of them who work in all kinds of organisations.
People forget, don't they, that the numbers are there.
And the unions themselves, if you look at their website, and even your trade union advertises tax refund, there are something like 3 million union members who have private health insurance. There are 1 million trade union members who went on strike. So, you know, most trade union members are actually very moderate people.
I mean, yes, and what I was going to ask is also the problem for the Tories in the North. I mean, if they're going to build relations with unions, that would help their problem in the North politically.
One of the main Tory party's electoral interests at the moment is rebuilding themselves in the northern cities. There was an away day for Tory MPs recently, held bizarrely in Parliament, at which they were discussing this, and the person presenting on the North MP called Chris Hopkins said, you know, the miners' strike is still one of the major barriers to a Tory electoral breakthrough in the North. But I think Robert's pamphlet is very interesting. But as you said, Joe, the public sector pensions issue. If this government does push through changes, there are going to be strikes, and it is again going to polarise, not as dramatically as the miners' strike, but it will again polarise relations, I think, between the Tory party and the unions. Because the Tory party will say, not actually that many people voted to strike. Let's raise the threshold. Let's say you can't strike unless 50% of people vote for it.
There have always been Tories that, you know, recognise the value of trade unions. We talk about hawks and doves within the Tory government, the Tory party. But, you know, clearly we need to have a relationship. We need to negotiate on pay terms and conditions. That's what that relationship is about. In many ways, we want to have partnerships, but that requires trust, confidence and respect. And all the while you've got Tories saying facility time, you know, taxpayers wasting money on trade unions. We need a healthy relationship that respects that trade unions have a role to play for their members, including those that vote for the Tory party, those that vote for Labour, because that's what we're there to do.
OK, Karen Jennings, Robert Halfon, thank you very much.